3 years of punishment had finally come to an end, and Enrique didn't even bother showing up alone. He sent another woman to fetch her. Standing tall and cold beside him, he declared, "I heard you've learned your lesson. I'm giving you a chance to redeem yourself. Your sister Sandra is gentle and graceful. Learn from her. Stop being a burden." Everyone around expected her to break down, to cry, to beg for forgiveness, to cling to him like he was her last lifeline. But instead, Jasmine bowed her head and offered a calm, deep nod of gratitude. Enrique's brows furrowed. "Jasmine, I'm your fiancé. You don't have to be so distant with me." She smiled faintly. Not for long, she thought. 3 years of suffering had earned her the one thing she wanted. Points. Just 10 more days. Then she'd be free. Not just from him, from this entire world. From this moment on, Jasmine Mu would fade into the shadows and never again cross his path. She had just returned from the mountains, her clothes still stained and tattered. Before she could even change, someone dragged her to the front of the village where a long line of luxury cars gleamed under the sun. At the head was a black SUV. Enrique's. Even before reaching the crowd, Jasmine could hear their mocking voices. 3 years, I wonder how the spoiled princess looks now. Princess? Please. If the Coup family hadn't taken her in, she'd have been sleeping under a bridge long ago. She was impulsive and arrogant. A little suffering was exactly what she needed. That last voice, soft, polished, yet full of venom, she recognized immediately.
Sandra.
The woman Enrique had once wanted, but could never have. After divorcing her husband, Sandra returned to the country with her son and conveniently moved into the Coup household. 3 years ago, during an argument, Jasmine had accidentally injured her. Enrique's punishment was swift and brutal, banished her to a remote village. If 3 years isn't enough, he'd said coldly, then it'll be 6. Or 10. You're so young, Jasmine, and already so cruel. I'm doing this for your own good. With that kind of temperament, how do you expect to become the Coup family's daughter-in-law? For her own good. That's how he justified everything. He left her penniless, completely cut off from the outside world. No contact, no support, no voice. Nothing but silence. She had wanted to laugh at the absurdity, but even that had been stolen from her. The mountain wind was sharp and bitter. Her once glossy hair had turned dry, brittle, and yellowed with malnutrition, sticking to her cheeks like dying grass. Her skin, once delicate, now looked like shriveled fruit, dry and cracked. At 22, fine lines already framed her face. Sandra's right. She was kind enough not to call the police back then, someone muttered. Otherwise, Jasmine would have been locked up by now. Sandra gave a gentle, practiced smile. I just didn't want to make things harder for Enrique. After all, she still is fiancé. She turned toward Enrique, eyes shimmering with crocodile tears. What do you think Jasmine will do when she sees you again? Someone asked playfully. Oh, that's easy. She'll cry her heart out. Then she'll throw herself at him, begging him not to leave. Another woman scoffed.
Ugh.
The ride here was awful. Just dirt roads and mosquitoes. Can you imagine? Jasmine, the spoiled little princess, must have been through hell. Enrique chuckled, cold and amused. I came in person to see if she's truly changed. And if she hasn't, then it's another 3 years, he said flatly. Sandra bit her lip, clearly distressed. And the wedding? Postponed, naturally. She lowered her gaze in disappointment. Just then, someone in the crowd gasped, pointing at a figure slowly approaching. Is that Jasmine? No way. That peasant? It can't be. I know what she looked like. That can't be her. But Enrique's gaze followed Sandra's subtle gesture toward the girl. Look at her necklace, she said, clutching his arm. His eyes narrowed as he stared at the plain silver pendant hanging around Jasmine's neck. When his men had dragged her out of the Coup house 3 years ago, they had stripped her of everything except that one simple necklace, the last thing her mother had given her. He hadn't bothered to take it away. Jasmine, he said finally, his voice colder than the wind that cut through her bones. In the past, that tone would have shattered her. She would have cried, screamed, clawed at Sandra for stealing his warmth. But now, her heart was like a brittle leaf caught in an autumn gust light, empty and lifeless. No joy, no grief. Just stillness. Mr. Coup, she replied softly, brushing her tangled hair behind her ear. His frown deepened. I heard you've learned to be more obedient. I'll give you a chance to correct yourself. Sandra is gentle, thoughtful, considerate. When we return home, you do well to learn from her. Stop causing trouble. Stop making the family worry. Jasmine didn't answer. She simply nodded, ever so slightly. Enrique frowned harder. She used to talk too much, too loud, too boldly, and it irritated him. Now that she had finally given him what he wanted, still wasn't satisfied. But Jasmine didn't care anymore. She stood there, head bowed, as lifeless as a hollow tree. Jasmine, what happened to your foot? A woman in the crowd asked, startled. Her eyes were filled with shock and a touch of pity. Jasmine looked down.
Ah, yes.
Her first winter in the mountains. It had been freezing, and she tried to learn how to chop firewood. A log had fallen on her foot, ripping off her toenail. It had never grown back. She shifted her weight slightly, but her old, patched-up sandals couldn't hide anything. So she didn't bother. If you were hurt, why didn't you tell me? Enrique demanded. What did you do with the money I sent for medicine? His voice was sharp, angry. She couldn't understand why he was so upset. She just bowed her head lower, hoping his anger would burn out soon. She needed him to take her back to Beijing. There was still one thing left to do. It's getting late. Come home with me. Just as Enrique finished speaking, Jasmine lowered her head and bowed deeply before him. Thank you, Mr. Coup, she said in a low yet steady voice. The air fell into a strange silence, broken only by the distant howl of the wind. Perhaps everyone was curious to see what 3 years had done to her. Or perhaps they had just come to witness her humiliation. After all, more than a dozen people had shown up. But now, not a single one spoke. Even Sandra's eyes widened slightly in surprise. Enrique seemed stunned at first, then visibly irritated. Jasmine, he snapped. I'm your fiancé. You don't have to act so cold, pretending to be submissive. I know you hate me for sending you away, but you attacked first. Sandra nearly lost her eye that day. Jasmine took a slow, deep breath, suppressing the turmoil rising within her. Her rough, thick fingernails hardened from years of labor dug into her palms, nearly breaking skin. But she said nothing. In 10 days, none of this would matter anymore. Not Enrique. Not Sandra. Not anything. That thought alone filled her with relief. Sandra, she said, bowing once more, this time even lower than before. I'm truly sorry for what happened that day. Enrique's jaw clenched. His face stiffened as if something inside him snapped. He took a sudden step forward and grabbed her wrist. I don't know what game you're playing, Jasmine, he growled, but listen to me, if you ever hurt Sandra or her son again, I won't be so forgiving. He shoved her toward the car and slammed the door behind her. If I can bring you home, I can send you back just as easily. She looked up at him calmly, really seeing him for the first time that day. In this strange world, she had been orphaned at 3. The Coup family took her in, and she had loved them like her own. When she first felt love, it had been for Enrique. They got engaged. Then one day, Sandra and her son moved in under the same roof. Jasmine watched Enrique prefer them, protect them, treat her like a threat.
She cried.
She screamed. She broke down. She even contemplated ending her life. But she never, not once, thought of hurting Sandra or her child. And yet no one believed her, no one but her adoptive mother, who was already too sick to protect her. Mr. Coup, she said softly, you don't have to worry anymore. I won't be difficult. I'll change. Maybe it was her obedience that softened him. Or maybe her haggard state stirred something like pity in him. The sharpness in his eyes faded just a little. He even reached out, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Jasmine," he said, "if you had been like this before, you wouldn't have had to suffer those 3 years. When we return, get along with Sandra. Treat her like your sister the way I do." Jasmine gave him a faint smile.
"Sister."
"How ironic." "All right," she said. Enrique patted her head gently. "When we get home, freshen up. Don't let my mother see you like this." "Okay," she murmured, gaze lowered, voice docile. But Enrique's hand froze midair. Her skin, once soft and pampered, had turned rough from wind and laborso cracked that even his touch recoiled. He knew better than anyone how much she used to care about her appearance. But that room with the mirror? That was Sandra's now. Her music studio? Converted into David's study. The second floor, once shared by her and Enrique, now housed them Sandra, Enrique, and David. A complete little family. Sandra, with her usual smile of apology, lightly held Jasmine's arm. "Jasmine, don't be upset. I'll ask the servants to empty your room. You can take the guest room for now." Jasmine pulled her arm away, wanting only to bathe and change before seeing her adoptive mother. But Sandra blocked her path again. "Are you angry?" she asked gently. "Don't worry, I'm not trying to fight you. I'll ask David to move his things out right away," but David, who had just come running down the stairs, burst into tears. "Why do I have to leave?" he sobbed. "Uncle Coup said this is my house. I can live wherever I want." Sandra rushed to comfort him, but suddenly, the boy grabbed a cup and hurled it at Jasmine. Sandra tried to stop him, but failed. The cup missed her face and smashed against her knee. She flinched, but before she could speak, Sandra turned to David with a sharp slap. "Why are you so spoiled?" she scolded, tears brimming in her eyes. "Uncle Coup was just being polite to you. Did you really think this house is yours? It's your Aunt Jasmine's house. You don't have a home, do you understand?" Sandra burst into tears, her whole body trembling. When Enrique walked in, the first thing he saw was Sandra holding David, both of them sobbing uncontrollably. "Uncle Coup," David wailed, "are you going to throw us out?" "Who said that?" Enrique asked, crouching to pick the boy up. "I would never kick you or your mother out. Then why do we have to move rooms just because she's back?" "I don't want to live in the servants' quarters." Enrique's face darkened. "Jasmine," he said coldly, "you still haven't changed. You've barely returned and already there's chaos. She's a single mother, could you show some compassion?" Sandra cut in softly, tears sliding down her cheeks. "Enrique, don't be harsh. This has always been Jasmine's house. David and I are just guests. We know our place." Her voice trembled, and her slender frame seemed to sway like a delicate willow in the wind. Enrique's face tightened further. "The room stays as it is. You three will remain upstairs. There are enough rooms in this house, surely one is enough for you, Jasmine." He gave her a look of utter disdain. "If you have a problem, bring it to me. But if you try to cry, cause drama, or hurt them again," his voice dropped like ice, "you know I won't forgive you." Jasmine turned to Sandra. The woman sobbed quietly, her gaze darting away. Then she looked at David. Tears still glittered in the boy's eyes, but behind them shimmered a twisted glint of triumph. Finally, she faced Enrique. He was watching her closely, waiting for the inevitable outburst. He expected jealousy, rage, any sign that she was the same as before. But Jasmine's expression was serene. Still. Like a deep lake undisturbed by the storm above. She even smiled faintly. "All right, I won't change it. I can sleep anywhere. The servant's room is fine." Her voice was calm, indifferent. Without waiting for a response, she picked up her worn bag from the floor and headed upstairs. It was just 10 more days she could endure that. A servant's room was still better than the cracked mud house with freezing wind whistling through the walls back in the village. She wasn't picky. After bathing and changing into clean clothes, she came downstairs. The first thing she wanted to do was visit Mrs. Coup at the hospital. To reach the garage, she had to pass through the garden. The sun was dipping low on the horizon, casting warm gold and orange streaks across the sky. In the yard, Enrique was playing with Sandra and David. At first, Jasmine only watched quietly from the side. But just as she stepped outside, Enrique reached for Sandra's wrist. "You're holding the racket wrong," he said. From where Jasmine stood, it looked like he was embracing her from behind. Sandra's cheeks flushed pink. She glanced briefly at Jasmine. There was something smug in that look, something that dared her to react. Then she leaned closer to Enrique, pressing her body subtly against his. "I guess I'm a little clumsy," she murmured. "It's all right," Enrique replied warmly. "I'll teach you." David clapped his hands and cheered. Uncle Coup and Mommy look like a couple. "David, don't say that," Sandra said softly, pretending to scold him. Without shifting her gaze, Jasmine kept walking across the garden. Her steps were steady as she headed toward the car. Just as she reached it, a thought struck her. She turned back, toward the garden. The hibiscus flowers, Mrs. Cou's favorite, were still blooming. Jasmine decided to pick a few to brighten the hospital room. She took 2 steps toward the flower bed when Sandra suddenly grabbed David's hand and ducked behind Enrique, a look of exaggerated fear on her face. Without hesitation, Enrique stepped in front of them protectively. "Jasmine, what are you trying to do now?" he snapped. "I'm warning you." She didn't look at any of them. She walked calmly to the hibiscus bushes, picked 2 of the most beautiful blooms, turned and left. She never saw Sandra watching her with pursed lips, thoughtful. Nor did she see Enrique standing still, staring after her for a long time. Even when Sandra called his name multiple times, he didn't respond. He was lost in something. Chapter 5. It had been 3 years, and Mrs. Cou's health had only declined further. Jasmine waited at the hospital for a long time before the woman stirred awake for a brief moment. The nurse said she barely recognized anyone anymore. But when Jasmine stood by her bedside, hibiscus flowers in hand, Mrs. Coup recognized her immediately. "Jasmine, you came." Tears welled up in Jasmine's eyes. "I'm sorry, Mama. It took me too long to come see you." Mrs. Coup gently caressed her face, eyes full of regret. "You've gotten so thin, far too thin. At least you don't have to diet anymore," she added weakly. "But you should put on some weight." Her voice was soft, fading. She glanced at Jasmine, then the flowers, and closed her eyes again. Her moments of clarity were short and rare now. Jasmine placed the hibiscus on the bedside table and leaned down, whispering, "Mama, you're going to be okay. When you get better, divorce him. Leave the Coup family. Live the free life you've always dreamed of." Mrs. Coup had fallen ill from years of burying her grief and frustration, all due to her husband's constant cheating and his other family hidden on the side. At one point, he even brought the mistress and her children into their home. Only when public pressure became unbearable did he finally send them away. Jasmine's last unresolved wish before leaving this world was her Mrs.
Coup.
For 3 years, she had endured every hardship, every insult, and never tried to escape back to Beijing. She did it for 2 reasons. First, to earn enough points to return to her original world, where her true family waited. Second, to earn even more points to give her adoptive mother a healthy body. Now she had achieved both. Of the 9 days she had left, she spent 2/3 of them at the hospital. Slowly, Mrs. Cou's condition began to improve. Each day she stayed conscious a little longer. Jasmine rarely returned to the Coup house now, only going back briefly to gather supplies. Every time she did, she would find Enrique outside, playing happily with Sandra and David. 3 years ago, that sight would have crushed her. She would have burned with jealousy, sorrow, bitterness, helplessness. She would have spiraled into despair. But now she felt nothing. After washing up and changing clothes, she asked the kitchen to prepare some nourishing broth. With everything packed, she was ready to return to the hospital when Enrique stopped her. "I need to talk to you." She looked at him calmly. "Go ahead." He hesitated. Instead of speaking, he just stared at her. It was her 6th day back. Having shared every meal with Mrs. Coup, Jasmine had started to gain a little weight. She was still thin, but no longer frail. Her skin had begun to glow again, her face less pale. She had trimmed her hair, cutting off the dry ends, making her look younger. After all, she was only 22. With a few days of rest, her body had started to recover. "Mom says it's been nice having you at the hospital," Enrique said, finally. "She talks about you all the time. You've really matured these past 3 years. You're calmer, more understanding." He paused, then added, "But the wedding will have to be postponed again." He looked straight into her eyes. "And this has nothing to do with Sandra." "That's fine," Jasmine said, cutting him off. "You handle it however you want." "Jasmine?" He looked surprised. But she had already grabbed her things and was walking to the door. This was their last goodbye. All she wanted now was to be with Mrs.
Coup.
"Are you upset?" he asked, catching her by the wrist. "No," she said, gently pulling her hand away. "I already said you do whatever you want." She didn't want to waste another second on him. So, she pretended to obey. "Brother, I'll do whatever you say." Maybe it was the way she called him brother, something she hadn't done in years, that stirred something in his heart. His gaze softened. "Jasmine," he raised his hand as if to ruffle her hair, the way he used to. But then Sandra's voice floated down from upstairs. "Enrique, I twisted my ankle. Can you come look at it?" Instinctively, he turned toward the sound. Jasmine seized the moment and quietly slipped out. Behind her, Sandra's soft, wavering voice echoed. "Is Jasmine mad at me again? It just hurt too much, I couldn't help calling you." "No, she's not upset," Enrique replied, but his voice lacked conviction. "Sit down, I'll call the doctor to check you," Enrique had said, but she simply shook her head and walked away, leaving those voices behind like dust in the wind. The crisp autumn air brushed against her skin, as if reminding her only 4 days left until she could go home. Chapter 6. Enrique had begun visiting the hospital more often now. Mrs. Coup already knew what Jasmine had decided. That's why, each time he arrived, she gently insisted Jasmine return home to rest. She no longer smiled seeing the two of them alone together like she once did. On the final night before Jasmine's departure, she had planned to sleep at the hospital beside Mrs.
Coup.
But Enrique came again. While he stepped into the doctor's office, Mrs. Coup held Jasmine's hand tightly. She sat up in bed and stroked her face, silently, lovingly, for a long while. "Jasmine," she whispered, "live your life well. Mama will be okay here." Her tears fell quietly, and Jasmine couldn't hold back her own. Like when she was a child, Mrs. Coup kissed her cheek to soothe her. "Go, Jasmine, and never come back." Jasmine left the room without looking back. Back at the Coup household, she began to pack. She didn't have much to take. In the end, she only brought with her the photos of her and Mrs. Coup and the bracelet she'd been given on her 18th birthday. Every photo, with Enrique, she tore and burned. The gifts he'd given her over the years? They remained untouched on the table. She took nothing of him with her. At dawn, Enrique returned from the hospital, and with him came the performance. His car hadn't even fully stopped before Sandra came running down the stairs, tears streaming down her face. "Enrique, save David, please. You have to save him." She collapsed into his arms, trembling in a picture of perfect, helpless fragility. "I know Jasmine hates me, but if she has a problem, she should take it out on me. Why hurt David? He's just a 7-year-old boy. What happened, Sandra?" Enrique demanded. "Explain yourself clearly." "This morning, I gave him his clothes, and he had an allergic reaction, rashes all over. I washed the clothes last night, they were clean, but someone poured shellfish juice on them. The servants said the only person who went into the laundry last night was Jasmine. She knows David's allergic to shellfish. 3 years ago, she did the same thing." When Jasmine came down the stairs, Enrique's face was dark with fury. Yes, 3 years ago, David had nearly suffocated from an allergic reaction. And who had been blamed? Of course, her. She denied it with everything she had, screamed, fought, and in the chaos, she pushed Sandra, who fell and struck her eye on the edge of a table. Enrique had exiled her to that remote village with his own hands. And now, 3 years later, David had another reaction. Who else could they blame but the repeat offender? But this time, Jasmine said nothing. She simply smiled as she watched Sandra deliver her performance. Enrique's rage only deepened. Jasmine, what do you have to say for yourself? She shook her head. Nothing. You did this because you're angry about the wedding being delayed? No, then it's because you still haven't learned anything? She smiled again. Think whatever you want. If something happens to David, what will you do? Kill me? Or send me back to that hellhole? Her gaze was hollow, stripped of all hope. She looked him in the eyes and said, You never believed in me. No matter what I said, you never listened. So I only have one way left to prove my innocence. With that, she reached for the fruit knife on the table. Jasmine, what are you doing? Enrique shouted. She turned to him with a final, sad smile. That look didn't need rehearsing. They had grown up together, once family, once lovers. She had given him the most sincere part of herself. Nothing had ever been fake. But now, everything was broken. She had never imagined things would end like this. But it was ending. And there was nothing in this world left to hold her back. The system had promised it would block her pain. So when the blade pierced her chest, she felt absolutely nothing. Her body collapsed quietly to the floor, the white of her dress blooming red with blood. It must have been a haunting sight, one that no one would ever forget. She could hear voices shouting, chaos erupting around her. But above them all, one voice cut through Enrique's. Desperate. Broken. Screaming her name over and over. But her eyes had already closed. In the middle of that growing pool of blood, she shut them peacefully. Chapter 7. Jasmine. Jasmine. Enrique pressed down on the wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. But it was no use. She could feel her body getting colder with each second, her breaths turning shallow, barely there. Sandra stood frozen with fear, her face pale as paper. The servants were in total panic. Some were calling for an ambulance, others screaming, a few even fainting. And then someone else's servant sank to their knees, eyes wide with horror. It was her, he cried. She paid me to do it. 3 years ago it was her fault, too. He pointed straight at Sandra, his voice cracking, the weight of guilt too heavy to bear. Miss Jasmine was innocent. She was always the victim. Everything was that wicked woman's plan. She even used her own child. Enrique turned his head sharply to Sandra. She screamed and bolted up the stairs. David was still up there. Yes, he was allergic to shellfish, but with the right medication, he would have been fine. No one had expected Jasmine to react this way. Sandra had never imagined her little show would collapse so completely. But none of that mattered to Jasmine anymore. The wicked always fall by their own lies. Perhaps this was justice. Jasmine, the system said softly, do you want to stay and watch how it all ends? Or are you ready to go? She smiled faintly and shook her head. Let's go. I want to go home now. She couldn't wait another second to see her parents. And her real fiancé, the one waiting in her original world. The system had told her many times, in all the countless worlds it had seen, no one had ever been as loyal and devoted as her fiancé. Deep in her heart, all Jasmine wanted now was to return to him. The rest, Enrique, Sandra, this world meant nothing. Because once you feel neither love nor hate for someone, what happens to them no longer matters. And the moment those words echoed through my mind, the body of Jasmine in that other world wrapped in Enrique's arms released its final drop of blood and drew its last breath. From that point on, nothing that happened there would concern me ever again. In the soft glow of transition, I saw a slender silhouette standing by a window. Slowly, I opened my eyes. The steady beep of monitors filled the quiet air. The figure turned sharply. He was trembling, just barely, and in his eyes I saw disbelief, overwhelming emotion, and a kind of fear that cut deep. Beneath it all, a sorrow lingered, one that had clearly taken root in his soul long ago. Then my memories came flooding back in a rush, sweeping away every last shadow of the world I had left. I knew without a doubt I was home. My chest swelled with warmth, and tears streamed silently down my face. Stephen saying his name felt like waking from a dream that had lasted centuries. But when I glanced at the medical chart by my bed, it read, age 22. In this world, only 2 years had passed. But for my family, for Stephen, those 2 years must have felt like an eternity. The system had told me many times, if not for their unwavering love and faith, especially Stephen's, I never would have made it back. Stephen had sworn before the gods themselves, offering half of his remaining life in exchange for mine, just to make sure I woke up again and lived a long, full life.
But why?
Why would he go that far for me? I hadn't treated him well before the accident. Since we got engaged at 18, up until I was 21, I spent every single day trying to break it off. I hated the idea of arranged marriage. I hated his painfully loyal affection. I hated the thought of a predictable life. All of my anger, my rebellion, I threw it at Stephen. I fought with him, ignored him, humiliated him in public. I deliberately did everything he disliked, hoping he'd be the one to call off the engagement. Then the accident happened. The doctors said I'd never wake up. My parents begged Stephen to let go, to stop wasting his youth on someone in a coma. But he never left. He took care of me, day and night, better than any nurse ever could. My body clean, well cared for, untouched by neglect was the result of his silent devotion. The system told me that even they, emotionless by nature, were moved by what Stephen did. Before they let me return, they made me promise, if I woke up, I would treat Stephen well. Because maybe he wouldn't live long enough to grow old with me. And I swore I would. I made up my mind to make it right. To marry him. To become his wife. To spend the rest of my life with him. But I never imagined that when I recovered it would be Stephen who asked to break the engagement. Chapter 8. During the year you were in a coma, he said gently, I regretted so much. If I had agreed to end things when you first asked, maybe we wouldn't have fought. Maybe you wouldn't have left that night. Maybe the accident wouldn't have happened. He adjusted his glasses, that soft, familiar motion, and looked at me with a faint smile. Jasmine, you're still young. You shouldn't be tied to someone you don't love. Then he handed me the locket our families had exchanged when we got engaged. His ring finger was bare. The engagement ring he never took off was gone. Only a faint indentation remained where it used to be. I looked down at my own hand, empty too. I'd taken off my ring after our ceremony and never worn it again. A bitter ache slowly bloomed in my chest, rising into my throat. I had so many things I wanted to say, but none of the words would come. Stephen, sensing my silence, didn't press. I'll go. Rest and recover well, he said, standing up. When you're discharged, I might not be the one picking you up. Please take care of yourself, Jasmine. His tall frame stretched in the window light, casting a long shadow across the room. But the shape of it felt cold, lonely. My eyes blurred. I could no longer see the emotion in his expression. I'll go now, he said, lifting a hand as if to stroke my face one last time, but before his fingers touched me, he let it fall. He turned away, took a step. And I reached out, gently holding his hand. Stephen, where's your ring? I felt the subtle tremor in his fingers. He instinctively tried to pull away, but I held tighter. Where's your engagement ring? He turned back to me, eyes downcast. His Adam's apple bobbed sharply. It's in the box, he whispered. Then take it out, I said. What? Take it out. I don't have the strength in my hands right now. Stephen pressed his lips together and stared at me. Then he slowly stepped back, picked up the box, and opened it. He handed me the ring case. I opened it and removed the ring, then looked up at him. Stephen, give me your hand. But he didn't move. His long, slender fingers curled into a fist. Jasmine, you don't have to do this. Don't have to do what? I asked. You don't have to force yourself just because you feel grateful. Do you think I'm the kind of person who would marry someone out of gratitude? Stephen said nothing. But for the first time, Something flickered in his eyes of faint light where there had only been sorrow. If I wanted to thank you, I continued, there are 100 other ways I could do it. Do you really think I'd commit my life to someone out of obligation? Then why? He asked softly. I asked myself the same. Maybe after everything I'd lived through in that other world, I finally understood the value of real love. Maybe the Jasmine from this world had already loved Stephen for a long time, but she'd been too young, too lost, too proud to see it. Now all I wanted was something real. I smiled at him, directly and honestly. I didn't need to tell him about the pain, the darkness, or the knife in my chest. I didn't want him to carry that. All he needed to know was this was a new beginning. And this time, I would choose him. Fully. Freely. Forever. Stephen, I whispered, these past 2 years, I dreamed a very, very long dream. In it, we lived an entire lifetime together and we were happy. I looked up at him with quiet resolve. I promised myself that if I ever woke up, I'd marry you. That is, if you still want to marry me. If you still want to be with me. I waited, breath held, for his answer. Stephen remained silent for a long while. When he finally spoke, his voice was gentle but cautious. Jasmine, maybe after 2 years in a coma, you forgot some things. When your memories come back, when you remember who I really am, if you still want me, then we'll get married. Chapter 9. Who is Stephen really? The system had never gone into detail. It only mentioned vaguely that he was a few years older and that his love for me bordered on obsession. When I was younger, that intensity was what made me run. I resisted being with him. But I had never imagined just how far it went. Stephen wasn't simply someone who loved deeply, loved in a way that felt disturbingly like something out of a psychological romance novel. In the Zhou family estate, he had a secret room. Its walls were covered in photos of me, from every age. Every object tied to Mimi childhood marbles, broken dolls, even the love letters I'd received in school had been collected and preserved. My 18th birthday photo had been enlarged into a poster and hung prominently opposite the entrance. When I discovered all this, I stared at him in disbelief. Stephen, where did you get all of this? He handed me a warm cup of tea. Does it make you angry? He asked. Do you think I'm sick? Do you hate me more now? I thought for a long moment. Oddly enough, I didn't feel fear or disgust, just a deep, aching sadness. Because through all those years, I had never once returned his feelings. If the 18-year-old me had seen this, she would have been terrified. But I had lived 2 lives now. None of it frightened me anymore. There's more, he said quietly. I don't want to hide anything from you. 3 years ago, when you kept insisting we break the engagement, I started seeing a psychiatrist. Started medication. During the 2 years you were in a coma, my dosage doubled. His voice was even, emotionless, as if he'd already made peace with the idea that I might walk away. Jasmine, I'm a very fragile person. If you stay with me and someday decide to leave, I might completely break. I might hurt myself again. You're still young. I don't want to ruin your future. And if we ever have a child, I don't want them to grow up with a father like me. He fell silent, eyes locked on mine, waiting. I set the cup down gently, reached out, and held his trembling hand. Can it be treated? He looked stunned, then nodded slowly. Yes, but no buts, I said. Just tell me how. His fingers trembled harder. He needed time before he could answer. Stay, he finally said, voice cracking. Don't leave me. Ever. As he looked away, probably terrified to see rejection in my eyes, the lamp cast a soft light across his face. I could see the tension in his lips, hear the unevenness in his breath. I didn't say anything. I just let go of his hand slowly, gently. His breath caught in his throat. His eyes dimmed. And just before despair took root, I stood on tiptoe and kissed him softly. Stephen, I whispered, let's register our marriage tomorrow. Chapter 10. 1 year later, my body had fully recovered, and our wedding was finally set to take place. The night before the ceremony, Stephen was downstairs seeing off family and friends. I went up to my room to bathe and rest. That's when I heard a voice I hadn't heard in a long time. Jasmine, the Coup family is a mess now. Is that so? I smiled faintly.
Yes.
3 months ago, Mrs. Coup finally divorced. She got a large settlement and is now traveling the world with her closest friends. My smile grew. I hadn't expected to hear about her again, but it filled me with quiet joy to know she was finally free. That's wonderful. It is. But Mr. Coup, he's furious. The divorce humiliated him, and now the whole Coup estate is in chaos. After your death, Enrique found out the truth, everything. And by the way, during your exile, Enrique sent money every 3 months, but Sandra stole it. I let out a dry, bitter laugh. That's not just Sandra's fault. If Enrique had ever seen me as anything more than a burden, he would have never let me be humiliated like that. Exactly, the system replied. We all know who's truly to blame. And actually, Enrique hit Sandra.
Badly.
Mr. Coup tried to step in, but someone exposed his secret. He and Sandra had been lovers for years. She wanted to marry Enrique and had kept the relationship hidden all this time. When Enrique found out, he nearly lost his mind. He kicked both her and David out. What about David? I asked quietly. David's allergic reaction, he didn't get treatment in time. His throat swelled, and he fell into a coma. The medical bills are sky high, but Enrique refuses to pay a single cent. Sandra's ex-husband, when he found out, cut off all support and is suing her to reclaim the house he gave her. She's ruined now. No one wants anything to do with her. The system sighed, sounding oddly human. I paused, then asked, You didn't come just to tell me this, did you?
No. This isn't about Enrique.
Jasmine, ever since you died, Enrique's been on the edge of madness. The way you chose to leavite shattered him. He refused to bury you. Tried every ritual he could find to bring you back. And somehow he found us. I narrowed my eyes. What does he want? To see you. One last time. There's no need, I said flatly. That's what I thought, too, the system replied. But he's willing to make a trade. He said he'd give up everything he owns just to see you again. Jasmine, hearing that made me think of your husband. Stephen is deeply loved among us systems. We all admire him. None of us want him to die young. So my heart began to race. So what? I asked Enrique to give up half of his life in exchange. And he agreed. The system's voice was calm, but the meaning hit me like lightning. For a moment I froze. Then a quiet, overwhelming happiness washed over me. Does that mean Stephen will live a long and healthy life? Yes, it confirmed. But the final choice is yours. Do you accept the trade? Of course I do, I replied without hesitation. If I could, I would have given my entire life to Stephen. Great. Then when would you like to see Enrique? I turned toward the mirror. My skin was glowing, my face full of life. I looked like a woman deeply loved. I removed my pearl earrings and smiled. Give him a wedding invitation. Stephen and I are getting married tomorrow. He can come as a guest. And remind him to bring a generous cash gift. Stephen and I had agreed that our wedding guests wouldn't bring gifts or money. Instead, there would be a charitable fund at the reception. Every donation would go towards supporting women and children in vulnerable communities. As for Enrique, meant nothing to me now. But if he still had any value left, I'd squeeze every last drop from it. Chapter 11. When my parents took my hands and walked me towards Stephen, tears streamed down their faces. My own vision blurred with emotion. As Stephen held my hand at the altar, I glanced down at the jade bracelet on my wrist. Somewhere in that other world, I hoped Mrs. Coup was sipping wine in a sunlit cafe, traveling the world with her friends, finally free. Knowing that she was happy helped me let go of everything I had left behind. From now on, Jasmine and Stephen would live here, in this world, for the rest of their lives. I knew Enrique was somewhere in the crowd, but I didn't know which row or which seat, and I didn't care. Nothing would ruin this day for me. Not anymore. After the exchange of rings, Stephen kissed me, There was a murmur of surprise among the guests, but it faded quickly. Neither of us looked at the crowd. After the banquet, we drove off together toward our home. A black limousine followed quietly behind us. I didn't need to look to know who was inside. Enrique. But Stephen had no idea. And despite being highly intuitive when it came to my moods, it only took a few minutes before he sensed something was off. He gripped my hand tighter and tighter until my knuckles began to hurt. "Stephen, what's wrong?" I asked gently. He didn't answer. He just pulled me into his chest and held me tightly. We'd both had a lot to drink that night. His body carried the deep scent of alcohol, but it still smelled like home. "Jasmine," he whispered, his voice trembling, "this feels like a dream." He looked down at me, his eyes filled with disbelief and a lingering loneliness. I didn't say a word. I simply wrapped my arms around his neck and kissed him. We'd been intimate many times in recent months, but Stephen had always held back. I knew why. He didn't want to trap me. He thought that if he gave me one last exit, one final choice before the wedding, I might still walk away. What he didn't realize was that I had long since fallen in love with him. "Stephen, stop overthinking." I kissed him again and again, my lips swollen and red. "This is our wedding night. After tonight, even if you want to leave me, you won't be able to. Because I'll chase you for the rest of your life." In the soft light, Stephen looked at me, deeply and wordlessly. Then finally he smiled. "Jasmine, I give myself to you completely." That night, Enrique's car remained parked outside our home until dawn. I didn't go to him. I didn't allow the servants to open the gate. The light in our bedroom stayed on until nearly 2 a.m. A clear message. I stood at the window, forehead against the glass, drained and breathless. But instead of cold, I felt the warmth of Stephen's palm as he touched my skin. My forehead pressed gently against the scar on his hand. There were others, 2 small marks along his arms. I never asked how he got them. I simply bent down and kissed them, one by one. Stephen wrapped his arms around me from behind, his chest against my back. He kissed the spot behind my ear. His warm breath surrounded me. We sank deeper into the night. "Stephen," I whispered, voice trembling. For the first time, I felt something I'd never felt before, a quiet, delicate fear. "Jasmine, what should you call me now?" In the midst of our passion, he slowed down, the tenderness making my eyes well up. "Husband, my voice cracked. Outside, a soft spring rain fell. And inside, as if I too had become the rain, I soaked Stephen completely. "Jasmine," he intertwined our fingers and gently bit my neck. "Do you like this?" I nodded instinctively, then embarrassed shook my head. But in the end, I cried, overwhelmed, and answered softly, "Yes, I love it." He kissed the mark he left on my skin, then kissed me again, with all-consuming hunger. When we reached the height of it, I felt like I was being lifted straight into heaven. "Jasmine, if you like it, then stay with me forever." "Okay." "Yes." Epilogue. Enrique. The system kept its promise. It let him see her just once. He sat in the far back corner of the wedding hall, away from everyone else. From there, he watched her in white, radiant and tearful, as her parents placed her hand in the man who is now her husband. She was crying the whole time. But even in tears, she was stunning. Her husband never looked away from her, not once. During the first half of the ceremony, Enrique remained composed. But when the groom kissed the bride, something inside him shattered. The wine glass in his hand cracked and exploded under the pressure of his grip, shards piercing his palm, blood dripping down silently. There was a brief disturbance among the guests near him, but it quickly passed. A few people turned to look. But she never did. Not even once. Later, he followed them to their home. He waited outside all night. She never came out. He never got inside. The light in her bedroom stayed on until almost dawn. And when it finally went dark, he realized his time was over. He couldn't even feel the pain anymore. He had always believed she would marry him someday. That she, who had entered the Coup family at age 3, would remain with them forever. But he never imagined that she would one day walk away so completely and in such a cruel, final way. Her white dress soaked in blood, her body growing cold and stiff in his arms. She would never cry for him again, never argue with him again, never lean into him, voice soft and fragile, refusing to let go. It was as if everything had been an absurd dream. Enrique couldn't even understand why, in their final years together, he treated her the way he did. Why had he believed Sandra? Why had he truly exiled her to the mountains? Why, in all those 3 years, had he not visited her even once? If he had just once, maybe, he would have discovered what Sandra had done. Maybe there still would have been a chance for them. But he hadn't. And now, all he could do was drown in that self-loathing. In his endless regret, he finally surrendered. Before attending the wedding, he had donated everything he could. He knew what Jasmine had gone through during those years when she couldn't even afford something as basic as a sanitary pad. Perhaps that was why she now chose to help vulnerable women. And the only thing he could offer her anymore was to support that cause. Dawn arrived. It was time to leave. He drove through the heavy morning mist, heading back to his own world. And as the fog slowly lifted, he saw Ida's car hurtling toward him at full speed. He saw Sandra's face behind the wheel, wild, exhausted, broken. Instinct told him to swerve. But he didn't. In the passenger seat was David, still unconscious. The impact was violent. Bones snapped, flesh tore, pain exploded, and then everything went still, swallowed by flame. Good, he thought, as the world burned around him. People like them deserved to die this miserably. Jasmine, on the other hand, would live a long and beautiful life. In the final flicker of his consciousness, Enrique drifted far back in time, back to when Jasmine was only 3. Her mother had held her hand. She peeked shyly from behind, eyes wide and curious. Brother, she had called him sweetly. Back then, Enrique hadn't even turned 10. He'd held out his hand. She hesitated, then placed her tiny fingers in his palm. He held on tightly and thought, "This time I won't ever let go." But he did. And it was far, far too late.